Right, I will call us to order at 4:30 p.m. Tom, do you want to do the roll call?
Sure. Names up here. Elise Josephson is not present. Celine Swenson Harris,
I am here.
Jennifer Ridley,
Present.
Charlotte Helmer is not present. Kirkwood Donovan is not currently present. Taryn Wood is not currently present. Adam Howard. Present. That's roll.
I will read the land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some came here by choice from distant homes in hope of a better life. Some were brought here against their will, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Trust and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across barriers. And so we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land that we are on, that we now call Springfield, is located in the traditional indigenous homeland of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya people have stewarded this land in Springfield between two rivers throughout generations, and I ask you to join me in acknowledging their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We acknowledge that the city of Springfield shares its history with the exclusion and erasure of many indigenous peoples, including the Kalapuya and those who first inhabited land on which we are located. We express our respect for the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians of Oregon, whose citizens include the descendants of the Kalapuya people. We also express our respect for the federally recognized tribal nations of Oregon, which include the Burns Paiute Tribe, the Confederated Tribe of the Coos, Lower Umpqua and Siuslaw Indians, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the Coquille Indian Tribe, the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and the Klamath Tribes. In addition, we express our respect for all other displaced Indigenous peoples who call Oregon home.
To amend the roll, we now have Kirkwood Donovan present.
Great. Well, moving on in the agenda, we have review of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
The only change that occurred since you last saw it was adding Maddie to the business from the audience today. Which can be our next time.
Great, we will go to Maddie for business from the audience.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. Some of you know me. I am Maddie McGraw. I'm the curator over at the museum. And as part of, so we obviously went through this extensive ice storm. And I was tapped to be part of the emergency operations team for the city. And while I was working on that, I had some conversations with EOC leadership about, as part of the FEMA reporting, there's a section on identifying cultural items that have been damaged. And I don't know though, as a city, we have looked at that portion. I think it's like section 6 of FEMA emergency activation. I don't know that we have done it in the past, but we had some very intro conversations about, since we've lost not so much historic buildings necessarily, but we've lost a lot of historic trees and historic plants through this storm. And so we had some very early conversations about, it would be really nice to be able to document those things. And I mentioned the Historic Commission has been in a lot of talks of starting to do that process. You already are the ones in the city who have the best idea of like our cultural landscape in general, but also in terms of like wanting to identify those historic trees and historic like other items, plant life and such. And so I wanted to bring it to the group to see if there's interest in that. I have not heard much on it in the last couple of weeks, but I think it's definitely something that I wanted you guys to know about in terms of moving forward.
It would be really interesting to tag, into if we do a landscape survey. I don't know how the timing works. Like, I don't know when this data is due, and it's interesting because if we'd done a survey before the damage, then we would have something to compare to. And so, but it doesn't mean it's not still really useful and or couldn't still capture, like there's a huge stump where you talk to the person who owns the house and they can tell you about the tree that used to be there before the damage or whatever. Like it seems like a really interesting kind of mashup of our goals around landscape inventorying. I don't know what the best receptacle for capturing that data entirely is, because we have the interest of like documenting it for the purposes of like the district, of a point to refer back to potentially, and or use for, creating a tree walk or something, right? And then, and just understanding kind of what assets contribute to the district, formally or informally, right? But then it does feel really interesting to capture this, like what used to be that has been removed as of this exact point in time of 2024, right? Like this was a big event. And I don't know that that would be captured necessarily generally in like an inventory, like what we were talking about doing,
Mhm.
but it seems useful.
We did have an intern last
Mhm.
year that was doing a tree survey just for public trees, so at least in the public, we may have captured some of that prior to the storm.
Oh, nice.
So there is that. It was Julia, and she was in our office, but I think she was also working with ops because that's obviously out in the right of way and stuff. So I'll see where that information ended up and if we can utilize it or at least be able to suss out what was, historic or large trees and then go from there, we might have a better idea.
And it sounds like in terms of and Tommy might have a little bit more insights on this, but in terms of the outreach we did to homeowners in the district, it doesn't sound like we heard about too much significant damage to historical assets.
That's true, yeah. I'd say 95% of the calls that I got was about trees. And there were some that were on houses, but none that like crashed onto or damaged the houses, just more or less resting on them. So I had one call of a gentleman that did have some damage to his roof. He was only doing a roof replacement. So other than that, I didn't hear anything about damaged historical or cultural assets other than the trees themselves.
And I know as part of, I think it was early on when we were looking at coordinating, making sure folks were able to get in touch with Red Cross. They did send at least one person out from I think ops to go and identify different properties that had sustained like that level of damage that they needed to have Red Cross come in. And as far as I know, none of them were like historic, so.
That's good.
So if you'd like, I can reach out and like CC you and maybe pull, so this was Ken Bogany is our EOC chief. And so I can maybe just do like a email conversation and be like, hey, we've talked about it, there's interest. Like, can you give us a little more information? Kind of see like, if this is something where it's like, oh, it's due in a month, like there's no way we can do anything. Or, this is something that we have a little more time to work on.
I wonder if the easiest way to gather information, kind of like we did with this other letter, would be to send a follow-up letter, be like, hey, Washburn residents, now we're trying to collect data about, historic landscape assets that may have been damaged from the ice storm, for I don't know, we can describe it, the purpose of it in different ways, whether it's for this FEMA thing or just in general to capture that information, for records about the district. And, because people that are really, stewards of their homes and their properties are gonna want to share that information. And so, it might just be that we end up with a nice big file folder of people who've sent in information about their, what they lost.
Sort of wondering about that in those communications. I'm not as familiar with the FEMA funding for emergencies as I probably ought to be, but
Don't worry.
I am wondering, I guess sort of two pieces that don't feel like you have to have the answer to. But I'm wondering if the information we report here impacts the funding allocation that the city will get from FEMA. And then I'm also wondering if for those folks who maybe want to, it's a little harder with trees, but do something in terms of repair or mitigating the damage they had if they get access to funds.
Yeah, I don't know. I would hope that it would help on both those fronts. But yeah, like hopefully Ken will know. But yeah, that would definitely be obviously incentive for people to participate and identify their items.
Any other discussion on this? Thank you. I suppose I think I probably ought to ask if there's any additional public comment.
Seeing none.
Great. Um,
And Taryn has now arrived.
and am I correct in thinking that means we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. We will go to review of work plan. I don't have an update on walking tour guides. I know Charlotte is not able to be in attendance this evening, so I don't believe we have a update on educational opportunities. Is that correct?
That's correct. I assume some members at least get the info emails from Curry. So anything that pops up on there, if you're interested as far as educational opportunities.
There's the conference or whatever coming up.
Yeah, the main conference.
April.
Yeah.
Push.
Sometime in April.
Well, then let's go to our grant overview.
And if you want to stick around, you can. but-
Yeah, I figured I would, yeah.
Cool. Grant overview, the grant has been submitted. I got it a day before the deadline, so.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like, yeah, that's a whole
Yeah,
day.
a whole day.
You know?
Cause the last piece of the puzzle was the, budget spreadsheet, and I thought I would just send that over to finance if they needed to look at it. They said, no, not until we get the, paperwork and kind of what we're going to be awarded, and then they'll figure out match. So that is in. Basically everything that we had talked about allotting money to, we got money to. I think the final submittal was $14,565. So about as close to 15 as I could get, because that's the award that they do. And the tree or heritage tree, program or stuff that we were looking at, I did put as a backup project, and they do have extra funds. If it is available, they can award as well. So we might be able to get that done. Especially if we're not doing an ILS. We might have that backup project come into play between, August of this year when it goes live, or May, something like that, and 2025, the following year. So plenty of time to get our remaining RLS items done. And then we might be able to do a tree survey. So that's about it for the overview.
So any questions, comments? Folks?
Also, Taryn is now here.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, welcome. I guess my only question would be, when do they complete their process?
That's a good question.
And maybe we could, once we know that date. And we can assume we're gonna get some of the money, if not all of the money, right? So just working under that assumption, if we know what date it'll be available, maybe we can go ahead and reach out to the survey people, like the building survey people. Now and just be like, hey, we're gonna have the funds available most likely at this time. Can we get penciled into their calendar? That way we're not doing the like mad dash
I think that would be
The
a
end.
great, a great way to do this.
Yeah.
Preemptively.
Yeah, just get on that calendar.
Good idea.
Yeah, they already know what they need to do. It's already scoped, it's already priced, like we don't need to do anything other than just like, please do it.
I think one question that came up when Elise and Tom and I met to go over sort of final things on the grant application was that I'm not sure if we got an answer of if, given the amount of money we are trying to do to get the second part of the survey completed, if we have to have a competitive bid process for that. So I don't know if we are simply able to
Got
go
it.
back to the same people.
Was it less than 10?
The first one was less than 10. The second one, I think we had talked about it being a total of like 19,000. Because it's for all of the other assets. So we would have to put out a bid, and I would think we would contact WCRA and see if it's at least competitive, and if we can stick with them. I would think that's the best way to do it, even though we have to take other bids since they did the first set of work, but if it's all the same, then we can go with someone else with better bid.
And I don't have a good sense of if this is a consideration or something we're able to take into consideration, but I would think that them having done the first component might save us some money on the second component.
True, yeah.
I don't know if that comes into play in that process. I'm not really familiar with it.
Not sure.
But yeah, I think it would be great if we could start, especially since my sense is it's a pretty extensive project for them to do.
Yeah,
Start getting whatever that process has to be to
Yeah.
accept
I mean,
it.
if we need to get bids, then I guess we need to start jamming on that. Whenever
Mhm.
the solicitation for bids.
Yes.
It seems like we can get bids even if we don't have the money in hand, like,
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know how long just that piece takes either.
First draft deadline for RLS and ILS would be due by February 1st of next year. So nothing pressing, but the sooner we do it, the better. 'Cause, yeah, last year we
kind of
had a
escaped.
bit of a pinch.
Yeah.
And
So,
of course, with the awards, that's gonna take priority coming up here soon. And all of that, we'll need to get the bidding and everything out of the way. Have contract taken care of, and then they're ready to go whenever we say.
and so we will know that we have been funded on April 1st. Is that what I mean?
Application and agreement, yes, April
Okay.
1st.
Okay. And then Tom, I might look to you with my question on what for that component of asking for bids, what does that look like?
I would get with our contract specialists, and I think they would more or less direct it from there with the information that we provide, that here's what we need, here's what we're looking for and how much. I had missed that part of it when we did the initial phase 1, because that had already been taken care of. We had already gotten
Yeah.
bids prior to me coming on to the commission, so.
Did we even bid phase 1 though? Cause we kept it under the 10K, I think, because of that. Like, I think we split off a chunk because we didn't have time to do that, because we were in a time pinch. And we are just like, let's just do what we can.
Yeah, but I don't know how I don't think I was here. How we
Yeah,
selected
It
them.
might have been really close to all of us new people coming.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was under the 10,000, but if I recall, there was talk that yes, we had gotten bids.
Or at
So,
least, yeah, or, yeah, some cost estimates. or something.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume we went for whoever could
Do it.
provide the
Time-wise,
most of
yeah.
what we needed in the time
Yeah.
we needed. Okay.
We can look back and see who else we reached out to though at that time.
Mhm. I'm not even sure. I could just contact Melissa directly and,
Yeah, Melissa or Christina.
yeah, Christina might know, yeah.
Because if we actually did solicit bids at that time for the whole project, would that have counted as soliciting bids? I don't know.
I think
I should
that-
know because I was here and I just don't remember.
Well, and I think this is probably something, whatever department in the city
Yeah.
is normally responsible for this, probably knows exactly what they need to be doing. I think the question might just be, what do we as a commission need to get to them to do that? So I know the city buys things a lot more expensive than this, I'm sure. Knows exactly what they need to do. Okay. Other grant overview stuff, anyone, anything?
Did I miss anything important?
No, Maddie spoke earlier from the museum just about ongoing, our emergency operations center for the ice storm, any damaged assets, cultural assets, but also trees. 'Cause that's mainly what we've heard so far from the public is, tree damage, not necessarily historical asset damage.
Well, that's good for the buildings, not so much for the historical tree project.
Yeah, yeah, and I did mention we had a intern last year that did some tree inventories for street trees and public trees. So that was able to capture a little bit of information prior to the ice storm, so we'll see what information I can gather from that inventory. And then go through it to see if there's anything there that's sufficiently sized for a heritage tree designation and how it was damaged. Or if
Perfect.
it's-
Looking forward to it.
That'll be an ongoing one.
All right, well, seeing nothing on that, I guess we'll go to next steps / updates. Do we have any commissioner updates?
I'm trying to find that thing about the survey. I mean, on museum committee, we're jamming on the atlas. And you know, baby steps, it's getting there, we'll see. It's gonna happen, maybe this spring, like. We have a tentative internal deadline now of like April 1st, maybe, like, being able to send the package off to the publishers. Just like, you know, a very heavy, big lift. But we're at the point where we're basically sitting as a group of 3 and reading aloud to like fine tune the words and like, you know, phrasing and then being like, but what about this fact? And then diving down a rabbit hole for 20 minutes, trying to like find one particular little, you know, footnote to squeeze in there and just, you know, so it's getting close, getting close.
For context, we worked for what?
4 hours on half of
On a
chapter
Monday?
3. Yeah.
Not even half of chapter 3, literally
Yeah.
like maybe 5 pages.
Yeah,
It's a deep.
yeah, and the thing's 220 pages long.
Well.
That's
a project.
Yeah. Taryn,
Taryn, I
we
think
can't
you're
hear you.
muted.
As somebody who got their degree in history, I totally understand it's so easy to get sidetracked.
Well, and this is after we've already like compiled it and written it, like it's already written at this point, we're just like now fine tuning and just it's, yeah, never ending. And you keep discovering new things, and we're like, well, this has to go in the book, like.
Of course, you know.
So I'm gonna suggest a weird idea, especially as a person who has 0 spare time between now and June. I'm wondering if we might think about, as we consider what our educational investments as a commission might be in the next year, if there's anything that connects to something in the atlas that could be a good place for us to do education and also have people be able to read more about it if they want.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there'd be tons of, we could do, I don't know, you talked about doing a couple like history talks at somewhere at the Wildish.
Yeah, we're working on, for the museum, this summer, we're launching, like probably at the beginning of summer, like hopefully tied to summer reading. We're launching an online catalog, a section of our catalog, so people will be able to search photos. And we're going for a LSTA grant with the state library. It'll be partially paying for a limited duration tech that we have working right now on finishing up the photo scanning and all of that stuff, and then she's moving into the archives. And part of the funding from the grant we put together would pay for two like history talk nights at the Wildish. One that would be probably in August and be sort of like general local history, hopefully paying for like a local historian to come in and talk, but then also highlighting the photo catalog being available online and then also the museum being reopened. And then we're hoping to do another one that would be like probably February of 25, and that would be kind of reiterating that like the photo catalog is available, like maybe looking at like some like successes of it, and then also talking about like whatever our new exhibit is for 25. So that would definitely be like something that we could collaborate on, and then obviously we have all kinds of other programming and stuff that we would be super happy to collaborate on.
I know we are, speaking of the grant, our education section of that is still, to my knowledge, somewhat ill-defined. And so it might be good for us to start thinking about how can we be part of a broader program on that.
There's so many things we could do too, from
Yeah.
like walking tours. I mean, if we all had like a lot of more time, additional extra time,
Yeah.
you know, walking tours and like, I mean, every page of the atlas of all 220 pages, you could like go stand at that corner and talk about all of the things that happened there and all the buildings that were there and all the businesses that used to be there, the changes, the facades or whatever, right? Or the cultural assets that, you know, kind of guide, or the lands, how the geography, you know, shaped the development of the city away from the river and all the things, or stare at the spot where the spring used to be. There's so many things to do.
And I mean, don't forget, like, we do have the physical space in the museum that is welcome anytime for collaborative programming. Like, I would love to be able to have something on site to let people know about the things that we offer and also the things that y'all offer. And it just always helps for, you know, recruitment and getting people involved. So that is always an open offer. Well, not right now, but once we reopen, definitely an offer.
Additional commissioner updates.
Whatever happened with the Bratton stuff, I don't know if that's applicable right now here.
Yeah, so there's more or less a violation, not more or less, but there is a violation at the Bratton House.
Not the Bratton House by the school,
Well,
but the Bratton
yeah.
Hadley property or whatever,
Because the house doesn't exist.
the old Bratton homestead. It's a 12th-ish. We're left. Yeah, middle, there you go, where the big tree is on Main up above.
Oh,
There.
Yeah, right there.
So, this large vehicle, utility vehicle place has extended their parking onto the Bratton property. So there was question as to whether there's damage to the site, and is it the site that's historic? Was it the house that's historic? If the house is gone, is it now not historic or what? But I haven't heard anything from code enforcement as to how this has progressed at this point. But that was kind of the last talks was, you know, what is its designation? And thank you, that your information helped a lot, Jenna.
So it used to have a house
Yeah.
that was on the National Historic Registry, and the house burned, and then they ripped it down and
The 2000s.
yeah, ish. And so, but there's still like kind of some perimeter footing and like a
There's
couple of
also
really,
historic trees.
yeah, two big historic trees. That one is a black walnut, and then I don't remember which
I
one.
think it was, this one was
Yeah.
Millie's.
It has a
or
name,
one of
yeah.
those, Yeah, Millie's fir.
Yeah, something like that. So anywho, it's an interesting site. There are some community members that have promoted the idea of like trying to turn it into like a little historic park or something. And they haven't necessarily had a lot of traction on that. But when they dismantled the house, some of these same community members actually like grabbed a bunch of the like interesting pieces of the house and have them stored in case they could ever do something at the site. So there are still like, there's still something that could happen here that could be interesting and
And we've
historically
photographs of the
relevant.
site and the collection.
And it was a cool and like neat old house that used to be here. So anyhow, the house burned, it's no longer protected, I mean, it wasn't really protected before, but it's no longer on the National Register because there's not a house anymore. And that was the thing that was registered, so, yeah, the question of like, does the site have any, I don't know, importance? I mean, biased opinion, yes, but like,
Are you gonna continue to allow them to encroach?
right, is it,
upon the space?
is there
I mean,
enforceable, like,
Right.
significance there, right?
Yeah, we were mainly looking at it for, one, how would we remediate it if it is historical and damaged? And two, just the enforcement of the code and telling them, hey, this is historic or it's not, and then, what kind of penalties there might be if it is still historic or a damaged historic assets. It's
So,
ongoing.
I guess a question that comes to mind for me is, if it is a historic asset, I'm assuming parking cars is not a viable use of that space. But what is? I mean, are
That's
they
the question,
essentially
yeah.
just compelled to keep it like that, or?
I don't know, I think that people that are interested in doing something with it were thinking like, some interpretive signage, and you could come,
Mhm.
like some picnic tables, and you could come learn about stuff or do a workshop or something, and descendants of the family still
Yeah.
own it, yeah. But,
But then it puts so much cost on them.
Yeah, like-
right, like, is it up to them to
right,
make it accessible? And like, then they have to think about insurance and.
and I think maybe at one point William Lane had there'd been some really casual conversation with William Lane about whether they would want to turn it into a park, and I don't know where that went. Wasn't really part of that conversation, but here it is. Nothing has happened. So on the one hand, there's opportunity there to retain some history. But then also like, what does that actually mean? Like, who's taking care of it? Like, who's gonna keep it mowed, right? Like, right now, they're paying to keep it mowed and keep it from turning to squalor and picking up limbs and whatever, so
1800s walnut is
it's a really cool
very
tree.
impressive.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
some pictures of it actually,
That's
we went
quite
over there.
impressive.
It was really big.
Yeah.
So certainly it would qualify for a heritage tree.
Yes, that might be our number one.
We've done part of the survey.
Not
Exactly.
knowing any others in town, that's a great candidate.
But we don't have a heritage tree program, obviously, and it doesn't offer any actual protection, so.
Right now.
Yeah.
At least we have good stewards of that property then.
Currently,
Yeah, it would be interesting to talk to the property owners and see like what their feelings are.
Yeah.
And, if they're like, we're sick of dealing with it, like we're letting them park on there, they're paying us $50 a month, like whatever, like leave us alone. Or if it's like, they asked if they could do this and we needed money, but like we'd rather see the property, like maybe figuring out ways to, if they want it, to help advocate for other use, but. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when did the violation occur?
ongoing.
We don't know exactly, but I think as one of our code enforcement personnel was driving down Main, it was noticed or it was brought to our attention one way or another that there are now utility vehicles for sale or repair. I'm not exactly sure what Loomers Auto LLC does.
I think they're mostly for sale.
For sale, yeah. So they just have them staged along the frontage and kind of stacked in there, even as we see here. But I don't exactly know when it started. That's kind of what our code enforcement personnel are tracking back and doing the work on right now. So again, it's ongoing and we'll see where that leads us.
Yeah, and the violation, I'm assuming, just is a land use violation because it's not currently, it's a probably residential, still residentially zoned, it's not storage.
It's all community commercials through there. Yeah, that's community commercials.
But it hasn't had a change of use to make it
Right,
like a
right.
parking or a storage area. or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, there has been no full change from what it previously was, as far as I'm aware. And the fact that what you brought up about the owners giving permission, they either had to get permission or they're doing it illegally.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And I know the owners are older,
Mhm.
so
I,
anything's possible.
I would assume the question of whether they have permission is probably a pretty significant
Absolutely.
Yeah.
component of this problem.
Yeah.
I think even Street View at no. I thought they were there, or maybe it was just recent images that code enforcement took, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it hasn't been, I'd say it's probably been since maybe the first of this year.
I don't know, I hadn't really noticed.
I noticed it maybe a month ago. But I know like last fall, I feel like I drove by and they weren't doing it yet, so.
I don't think it's been going on for a long time. I
Yeah.
think that's pretty accurate as far as this year it occurred. So, yep, that's that. There's a big, beautiful
That's a walnut.
walnut.
And the denture guy.
Yeah. Apparently Mark went to school with him.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like.
He was talking about that.
And it occurred to me, you get to keep your advertising on Street View until they have.
Yeah. But it is an interesting question just for the commission in general, I think, long-term, like philosophically, to consider like. Or just think about, do we need to establish any sort of parameters about what is a historic site, like. I don't know.
I do think that there's a very challenging piece here, right? If you have the actual historic home damaged in such a way that it cannot be repaired. Do we then want a space in our city, in our UGB, that can't really be redeveloped or used? And then that property owner is still responsible for making sure that that site is not dangerous, and pay taxes on it. I mean, that's a tough thing to ask somebody to do.
Yeah, I guess it's more about there's a policy aspect to it, but I just mean even just culturally, like. Once the building is removed, is the site still, historic? Whether or not it's protected in any way, or that there's a policy applied to it, or any of that, just like, just thinking, like about what this means. And whether is it worthy of trying to rally community effort to turning it into a park, or, like having a lamplight by the property, or like trying to, be a catalyst in some way for a preservation project, that could happen there versus, whether or not it's technically listed or whatever. It's definitely not, well, the Hadley house was, yeah, on landmark inventory. And it was part of a homestead, right? So like, it was obviously at some point more land, much more
Yeah.
land than that. And that's just where the house landed.
Well, and I think the tree piece of it also potentially complicates it, right? That it would be different if the house and the trees were gone.
Well, and it's a fascinating piece of like relatively untouched, like land that had one development on it. And nothing really before or after that, so it'd be very interesting to see like what kind of other materials are in the ground still.
Yeah, and I think also part of this maybe ties into the tree program is like, are we talking about this from the perspective of just recognition or from the perspective of protection? And I think in my mind, I'm just thinking recognition, like even for the tree program, like even if we recognize something as a heritage tree, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily saying, that we're putting any rules on it. It's just that, hey, congratulations, thank you for stewarding this tree. It's amazing and beautiful. And we recognize that it's 150 years old and that's awesome, right? Like,
And
so-
recognition itself may help save things.
Exactly, yeah.
Creating that pride.
And honestly, the National Historic designation is not anything more than that. Like getting something nationally listed doesn't protect the property either. It's just a more expensive tree medallion, essentially. It's like, whereas just being on our local listing is the only thing that really gives any true protection. So I think it's okay not to necessarily have to apply a policy to something, but that we can at least cheerlead or be a cheerleader for it.
And until we further evolve the tree felling ordinance, which with the Tree City USA designation, all of that, and I think I've said this before, but it only requires the protection of public trees. So that doesn't extend to private, although that is fully up to us as a city to say, we now want to control, preserve, maintain, or not maintain, but have an ordinance around private trees as well to preserve an urban canopy. If we're only doing that for the streets and public trees, then that's all the rest of the city that can cut their trees down without preservation or replacement, mitigation, stuff like that. If we lose those assets, then they're gone. But until we have a private or an ordinance that extends to the private side, then we're at risk.
Yeah,
And if this came under different ownership and they now wanted to develop it for the community commercial zoning and throw in a convenience store or something, who knows, like that tree that from the 1800s could be cut down.
it could. I mean, it could, even if we give it a tree medallion and it's not protected anyway. You know, that leads to another philosophical question is, you know, should we be in control of whether or not they're allowed to cut that tree down? And I don't know that we need to be, but, you know, in certain cases, maybe yes, but generally speaking, I would hate to undermine the ability to just do recognition if we saddle it with policy, right? Which I feel like we've struggled a little bit with the Heritage Awards of like, what, like, can we just recognize good things that are happening in the community? And it's, you know, it's been more difficult than it feels like it should be, and I feel like it's the same kind of thing. I just want to be like, yay, you have a cool tree, and you have a cool tree, and like, medallion.
Well, and I think too, I mean, we certainly get into a place where it might be difficult to get buy-in from folks
Exactly.
if
If we're telling them what they can't do with their property, yeah.
Yeah, I think,
I don't personally think it would make any kind of a good park or community park. I don't know. It's right all of that commercial area and with the trailers and stuff. I don't personally think it would, that would work.
I mean, people that live in trailers might like to have a park next door, but
do they have a?
Well,
Yeah, on the front
Okay.
end.
there's
it's
a
just a
lot of.
small lot.
Might even need to be rezoned to PLO for.
but that is something like, I think one good goal for this group that you guys already are doing is like creating that community, like the advocacy point, where it's like making sure that people are aware of these things. And like, if the community wants that, getting the community to know about our cultural assets, know that like these things can be removed and can be in danger, like making sure that people know about that stuff. And know that like, you don't want to see that change in your community, or you want to fight for something, like you can, there's ways to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure 99% of people don't know that this is the
No.
historic homestead site and that tree is 150 years old, right? Like,
There's
there's
nothing that tells you about
there's
that.
nothing that tells you that. So,
Something that would be really interesting, but would also get us deeply off track to look at right now is, I do wonder where this fits into. I know Willamette just did their comprehensive plan, just did their map of where they have parks, where they don't, and where it is difficult for people to reach a park. And I wonder what that looks like for this neighborhood. Because essentially going across Main Street is, for a lot of people, potentially a challenge to being able to reach a park. Although I think you have Willamette Lane Park right up there.
yeah, but
Yeah.
14 or 12.
Those are parks and open space, so to get an idea, there's.
There is really kind of a,
Dead space.
yeah.
as
What's
far
the
as-
one over there near A that's showing? Yeah, what is that? Oh, is that that's the
Oh.
building,
Oh,
memorial
yeah.
building? Interesting.
And like the trees through Tree City USA being public, that is completely like the will of the city, but if we were to ever impose, or not impose, but float the idea of extending an ordinance to private trees, it would need to be the will of the people, it'd be like a voted thing, because if we then impose that, you're right, it can be like, give them another reason to say that we're controlling how they can develop, but if it's elected by the people and the, you know, council and all of that, then we'd be in a much safer place.
I wonder if there's a way for people to just opt in, like individually versus it being a like, you know, some sort of like
One
all
size
or
fits
nothing
all.
kind of ordinance, like, could you opt into the program basically and not have your, you know, property be somehow counted?
Well, perhaps if there is something we can do to support people having trees.
Yeah, but in terms of
So-
counting towards Tree City
Yeah.
USA though, it's like you have to somehow, you can either count the residential ones or not, right? Or the count private ones or not. And once you count them, then there's some layer of jurisdiction over them, over those trees. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
think a
mean,
lot of
the
it is like the replacement of them, like if somebody's,
Mhm.
which that might be something that we could advocate for help with, like,
Mhm.
okay, so, you know. We're Tree City USA, yay, but you still have a tree you wanna cut down, like here's, like, you're gonna have to replace it, but maybe you get like a voucher or something
Yeah,
for
yeah.
help with that, or.
what is
That'd
it,
be
Friends
safe.
of Trees, is that
Mhm.
locally, yeah, partnership, or even, where there are violations and a fee imposed, that goes, or typically goes into a replanting fund
Mhm.
throughout the city. Or if there's a big development and they do their landscaping, but there's still mitigation, they can pay into the tree fund.
Yeah.
I mean, there's options there.
Yeah, I mean, because trees do just die. We,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like can't save them all.
Yep.
And even the ones you save eventually die.
Just lost a lot of them citywide.
We
And I
did.
think there'd be a lot of people who would be very challenged
Mhm.
if they then were also on the hook to
Yeah.
replace those trees in addition to the cost of removing them.
I will say Friends of Trees just had that event a couple weeks ago and I was there and there were a ton of people. They were out of stock. They had thousands of trees and they were out of stock like within, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, there were families, single people, like everybody of every age coming there and so grateful and so excited to get trees. So.
That's very good. So there's demand,
Mhm.
there's interest,
Mhm.
yeah, awesome.
And I think that was funded by Weyerhaeuser, I think.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be request here. Are there any additional commissioner updates? Okay. Let's go to appointments.
I had one email in the Historic Commission email. Glad I saw it. That showed interest, I recall, or maybe I already closed email, wondering about just the process and all of that, which in the listing and everything that went out, there was instructions and a link to the application and all of that, so I reiterated that whole section, provided links and everything, so hopefully they got their application in. I believe that closed last Monday, I wanna say.
I feel
Or
like it was
this Monday.
yesterday.
Yeah,
I think they closed it
this Monday,
yesterday.
okay, yeah. So yeah, that's now closed. We may have one applicant, which will bring us up to 8, and we are a commission of 9. Sounds like out of all of the BCCs, I don't know if y'all have any open seats in the museum, but
We have 2 openings and we got 1 applicant.
one, okay, yeah, just overall, Allison said that there's not a whole lot of response.
Talk about a labor shortage.
Yeah, can't even get volunteers. But yep, that's that. I don't know if they're going to be doing a further call or extending it or If yesterday was the deadline, if they're gonna put out another call, then that's yet to be seen.
Maybe we could make meetings more after work hours so that more people could get involved.
Yeah.
Just my
I hear you,
opinion.
Karen, I know. Thank you for joining when you are free and able to.
Thanks. I try.
We appreciate it.
Great. Well, is there any other business?
Book sale is not this weekend, but the following weekend, it supports the library and museum. It's a great way to, get something tangible and support cultural resources, to the community, so you should definitely get some books.
And they've got lots of good stuff this year. They've been getting lots of good donations, so.
We do it every year.
It's my favorite Friends event too.
Yeah. And the Veneta Library just had theirs a week or two ago.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah, was it the 17th, 18th, whatever weekend that was?
All right, well, seeing no other business, I'll go ahead and adjourn us at 5:21 PM.
Perfect. Stop share, stop recording.